Okay, we're happy to come to you from our home state, Arkansas, for a change. Some of the beautiful scenery we're going to show to you here. And we're privileged to be invited by the Arkansas Survey Unit out of Fayetteville. And, and Mr. Russell Scheibel here is going to tell us a little bit about the organization and introduce us to someone that'll show us through the lab where they've been on a dig now for approximately a week. Russell, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for entertaining us here.
Right.
Where we're looking now at a flotation area, this is material that has come in from the sites, and we take discrete samples. As you can see in each of these bags, each one has a separate tag, has a separate number, and we have to keep those completely discrete so that we, in an analysis later, we can refer back to them because we won't have the site anymore. This material is to be floated and then water screened. Over here to our barrels, we have a large 55-gallon barrel, and then inside it is a 30-gallon barrel with a screen in the bottom of it. You can see the water flowing in at the bottom of the barrel. It fills and rises out and goes out through a chute. And these two gentlemen are 6th graders and 7th graders who are taking part in our dig. They're some of the younger ones of our group. Our age range runs up to 74 this year, so I think we can accommodate just about anyone in the state of Arkansas. The material that floats, the light material, will go out through a trough and into a small painter's collection bag. Can you show one of those off to the side a little bit? I don't think no, don't take it off, please. But it collects into a painter's bag, and it will collect things like seed, small animal bone, fish bone, materials that we would not collect in normal processing. It will also collect even pollen, which is indestructible virtually. And from this, we can reestablish what the climate was at the particular time the sample was taken. And by doing that, we will know that perhaps it wasn't an oak hickory forest, it might even have been a cedar forest, or it might have been other kind of materials available. This means then that the Indians would have had many other resources to take from the nature. And so if we find that there's a particular source, for example, a turtle that they're not using for food, then we can speculate it might be used for some other purpose. At any rate, this material is taken from these areas, dried, and then taken into the lab for processing. And Mike Smoke Pfeiffer is our lab supervisor, and he takes it from here on and does all the analysis for us. Smoke, they want you now to take it from this step and take it through the lab and tell them all those wonderful magic things that you do in there to it.
Okay, we'll follow the artifact labeling and accession process in the lab. Okay, turn that up.
Just anything you might want to say about we'll go from here and just explain where we're going so it'll flow.
Okay. From the flotation process and the drying of the light fraction samples and the heavy fraction samples, we take those into the lab and process it. The area behind me is where we wash all the artifacts after they come in. Let's go into the lab and you'll see what we do with all these things. Many of the artifacts come into the laboratory from the field or the dry flotation samples from outside. The first thing they do is hit this table. They stay on this table until they get accessioned into the master book. That way the field supervisors on the individual sites that are excavating will know when the lab has taken responsibility for these things. From this table, after they're accessioned, they go to the various individuals working in the laboratory. And then they're sorted, washed, and labeled. Every day we get one bag of material where they're trying to recover artifacts and flakes from a very large pile of the pot hunter's back dirt there in front of one of the sites. This material has come from several of the sites. We find whole projectile points in here that they missed. All of this material from many thousands of years of occupation has all been mixed in together. So these are only taken as an example to show us the kind of stuff that used to be in context. The pot hunters left a large enough pile of dirt and artifacts that we get a big bag of this stuff every single day. In the main portion of the lab, this is where the artifacts get sorted out, and then they get washed, and then they get labeled. For example, on this table, we have two of our very experienced lab workers sorting out the artifacts that come in these individual bags from each provenience on the site. They're separating stuff out into 11 basic categories. We use that in our manual. As a matter of fact, the kind of artifact categories that they're separating them out to this year for this project are the recognizable lithic tools, and lithic is just Latin and means stone. Other chip lithics, ground stone lithic tools like hammer stones, abraders, nutcrackers, things like that. The unmodified raw material that we get lots of, prehistoric ceramics or baked clay. We have animal bone, plant remains, historic ceramics, historic glass, historic metal, and our favorite category is number 11, other, for things that don't fit in the other 10. The reason that even on the prehistoric sites this time that we include historic glass and historic metals is the fact that all of these bluff shelters were also used in the historic homestead period. There are remnants of a moonshine still in one. There are some of the other shelters were used for partially protected stock enclosures, for storage of various things. So besides the prehistoric occupation of these bluff shelters, there is also historic uses on the very top. This exhibit is referred to as a suitcase display. And this was made up there at the museum at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. It's a good example to show stratification in a site. For example, up there, there's a shovel blade, and it shows how the looter's shovel mixes up a bunch of the layers of stratigraphy so that the archaeologist really can't tell anything about it anymore once it's all been thoroughly mixed. When the heavy fractions come in from the flotation device, you can see especially big layers like this where there's a lot of large cobbles. There's other layers where there's very little in the way of natural stone. There's other layers like this coarse alluvium where it's a lot of grit-sized stuff and sandy things. And that helps us establish the chronology at the site, because every one of these bags that comes in, every one of the artifacts comes in is labeled with a field serial number, so we not only know what level it came from, we also know what unit it came from and where within that unit it came from. One of the important things that we try and do in the lab is preserve any of the carbon-14 samples, our burnt charcoal samples that come in from the field. These radiocarbon dates can tell us exactly when a given feature was formed. You can see the progression of artifact types from the top down through the bottom layers. For example, there's a little mole that goes in there. It's one of my favorite parts of the exhibit. When the field archaeologist at the individual site does their drawings of his excavation units, he will not only draw anywhere from 1 to all 4 of the side walls so we can get a good example of this, but as they excavate each layer down, we also map the floor, and we can map sometimes by color, sometimes by texture, and often by both, every little disturbance from an old tree root, from a rodent burrow, or something like that. So if we have an older level of artifacts and material remains, and we have something that's obviously younger that's got down inside of it, we'll be able to tell how it got down there to explain why it's there. These suitcase exhibits are also very handy for general public education. We use this and a number of other things for our open house last Saturday. This is an example of a number of the diagnostic artifacts that we're recovering from the sites. Approximately only 1 to 3% of the artifacts recovered from a site are the type that people would actually want to see in a museum. These are a few examples. We have a large mortar here. Many of the bluff shoulders will find anywhere from 1 to a dozen of these things, but they're too big to carry around. They're fairly easy to make. So they're usually a pretty consistent part of the artifact assemblage. Another interesting stone is this with a number of dimples in it. In an area like this, which is an oak and hickory mixed deciduous forest, there's a huge nut resource here. Nuts are very high in protein, high in fat, so that nutting stones are a real common thing we find. Often there'll be a fist-sized stone. They will use another stone like this and just crunch it like that. Instead of a nutcracker, they'll just kind of crush it to use it. So we'll have, this is one of the larger stones with the little dimples in there from use as a nut cracking stone. This was collected from one of the sites, and we're not really sure what this is. But it was unusual, and there's very little natural water-rounded sandstone up there, so for some reason they must have taken this to the site. There's an unusual projectile point that was found in one of the units. I believe they call that a lang tree, but I'm not sure. Here's 4 projectile points and a rounded hide scraper that were found in the pot hunter's back dirt pile. Another interesting find is a piece of quartz crystal. And these do not occur in this country, but they do occur to the Ouachita Mountains on the other side of the Arkansas River from the Ozarks. We have a very interesting piece of prehistoric pottery that has incised decoration, where they would go and cut away some clay, and then punctated decoration on the inside, where they would take a sharp stick or something and just press it to make decorative motifs. This is the only piece of this kind of decoration we've found so far, but we've only been here just over a week. For historic artifacts that come out of a site, a lot of people, when they first saw this, they thought it was a horseshoe, but this is a mule shoe. Mules have very long, narrow feet as compared to the wider, rounder foot of horses. So when we find stuff like this, this would fit into a museum display. It's a good educational tool for the people of the my generation and later that can't tell the difference between a horseshoe and a mule shoe. So even the historic sites come up with some artifacts that are useful for education.
They've got me wired down. Are you doing the commentary, Smoke?
Floodplain. This lake looks very different than it did in 1812 after the earthquake, because just after a few years after the earthquake, this whole area out here was filled with dead trees, because this used to be bottomland hardwood forest with a creek running down through the middle of the bottomland hardwood forest, lined by cypress trees. Away from the stream channel were bottomland hardwoods that are so typical of the lower Mississippi Valley. When the impoundment
The purpose of this class is to teach students how archaeologists know how old things are, and the focus is on various dating techniques and the reliability of these dating techniques. And at the moment we have Dr. David Staley from the University of Arkansas, who's talking about tree ring dating, which is the most accurate dating technique that archaeologists use. Also talk about radiocarbon dating and geochronological dating and a number of other dating techniques that are used to establish time in the past.
See old historic photographs of guys with 150 ducks on a day of shooting, you know, and naturally with that kind of hunting pressure, the ducks were shot out. And it was a very sad thing. And about the turn of the century, the dead trees started falling. You know, they rotted away, and now they're in the bottom of the lake, the dead hardwoods. The interesting thing, though, these are cypress trees, and their native habitat was right along the meandering stream channel where it was very wet, and they could tolerate the inundation, and they survived the earthquake. These are some of the trees that I just showed you from the air. Now, they didn't do real well. You can see they've had lateral dieback, and they're just kind of hanging on. But these trees did survive the earthquake, and so we took core samples out of the trees to study, to see what kind of growth response the trees might have had to the earthquake.
All right, here we are back again in our old native state, Arkansas, and we're now out in the field. We're on a dig, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Kathy Candy, here of the survey party. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about what they're doing. And Kathy, thank you very much for inviting us.
Well,
We
thanks for
appreciate
coming.
it.
All right, thank you. This is the 31st Annual Arkansas Archaeological Society Training Program. The Society is teamed up with the Arkansas Archaeological Survey with the University of Arkansas, and this is a program in which amateurs are trained in archaeological technique. They can take seminars and learn about archaeology, and it also is a way to help the Archaeological Survey get some much needed research done. This year and last year as well, we have teamed up with the U.S. Forest Service and specifically the Ozark St. Francis Forest to excavate several sites that they're concerned about in the National Forest in Newton County. And this year we're working at 4 bluff shelter sites, and this site, which is a historic farmstead called the Beckham Homestead. And this site dates from between 1880 and 1930 roughly. And what we're trying to do here specifically is to discover as much as we can about the structure of the farmstead, how big the house was and what it looked like, and to figure out what this large circular depression is over in this area, and also to find out as much as we can about the people that lived here through the kinds of basically trash and other remains that they left out here at the site, pieces of crockery and glass and nails, and that'll also help us to understand what the house might have looked like and how it would have been built. Since we are teamed up with the U.S. Forest Service, they're assisting us with personnel and logistical support. And on the other hand, the survey and the society are contributing volunteer labor to evaluate the sites that are here, as well as staff for training and teaching seminars. The 4 bluff shelters that we're working at all are endangered in the sense that they have been vandalized by illegal diggers, and we're trying to determine how much damage has been done to the sites and also to determine what kind of archaeological deposits are still there that have not been damaged. And we've actually found out that there's quite a lot that's still there that's intact, and we will be able to learn, and we already have learned quite a few new things about how deep the archaeological deposits are, how early there were Indians living here, and possibly some of the kinds of activities that they did here. To tell you a little bit more specifically about this site, I'd like to introduce Dr. Charles Ewan, who is a historical archaeologist, and he's with the Arkansas Archaeological Survey, and he is going to talk a little bit more specifically about the excavation techniques and the results so far at this homestead site.
Okay, as Kathy said, this is the historic site amongst 4 other bluff shelters. The difference here is that the bluff shelters we know dated to thousands of years ago, while this homestead, as near as we can figure, dated to the early 20th century. And the danger is we know we don't know much about the people from 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago actually. But we think we know everything there is to know about people from the 1920s and 30s that lived here in the Ozarks. And what we're finding is we probably don't know hardly anything about them. All we know from the preliminary research that we've done is that this property was bought in 1905. The Beckhams bought it in the 1920s, but that's about all we know because the courthouse burned down with all the records. So that's about it. We know about the Beckhams. He had 7 heirs. And we know that the Forest Service acquired this property in 1941, and it had a falling down house and barn. So that's the extent that we knew when we came into it. What we thought we knew was that we had a chimney pile here, and this was just a pile of rock poking through the brush, and a cellar depression. And our initial thoughts were that this was a house with a basement. And as we dug, we found out that the chimney didn't open that way, that it actually opens more towards me. You can see the opening firebox coming out, and then two lines of rock wall going off to the back there. So the house actually opened up, opened up this way, and it had a root cellar to the side of it that was probably square-shaped, was dug sort of in an easy manner, a large hole dug in the ground with rocks lining part of it, and that square-shaped cellar was probably parallel to the house. We're trying to find out what Mr. Beckham did for a living. We know that he sold some of the oak trees from his property to a local barrel-making company, but we don't know how well he lived. And we're hoping that the artifacts that we find will pinpoint it more when he was here and give us an idea a little bit about his standard of living, so that by the end of the second week of digging, we'll know how big the house was, which way it faced, what the cellar next to it was being used for, and maybe a little bit more about the Beckhams themselves.
This is one of the 4 shelters that we're doing some excavations in, and we're calling it the petroglyph shelter because it has a small rock art design on the back wall. And basically what we're trying to do here is to learn a few things about the structure of the site. In other words, how long the Indians lived here, and maybe what some of the kinds of activities that he did. And we also know already from the work that we've done that there was some later activity here, possibly in connection with the Beckham homestead that we've just looked at. They may have used the spring here, or it's possible that there was even a still here at one time. So these are the kinds of things that we're trying to investigate and find out by doing our excavation units. Our intention is not to completely excavate these shelters. Our intention is simply to do some sample area testing in order to find out some baseline information, and then from that to determine how best to protect these sites. And so I'd like to introduce Barbara Williams, who is an archaeologist with the Ouachita National Forest in Arkansas, and she is supervising the excavations specifically in this shelter. And she can talk a little bit about what's been found in the various excavation units so far. Barbara?
Thank you, Kathy. We started out our excavation about 8 days ago, and in order to best utilize the personnel and the time we had available to us, we decided to concentrate our efforts in areas that had been previously shovel tested to see if we had cultural deposits intact. And if you'll follow me up to this part of the shelter, this was one area where we had our positive deposits or shovel testing done, and we concentrated our units right here in this area. We have 4 units we laid out. They're 1 by 1 meter in size. Each of those is 1 meter square. We have so far taken this unit down to 90 centimeters below the surface, which is a little over, 12 feet? No, not 12 feet, 3 feet, I'm sorry. And the back ones have almost closed out because we hit rockfall and couldn't excavate below that. It was too much rock deposit for us to break up and get below. We're still working in these units, and this one has had some rockfall removed, and we're trying to go as deep as the one adjacent to it. If you'll notice the dark color of the soil in the unit here, this is a midden deposit, which has a lot of debris or organic material in it that causes that dark color. It's also what archaeologists like to find because we can gain a lot of valuable information from those kinds of deposits in organic matter, botanical studies, and faunal material. And occasionally we do find prehistoric lithic materials, and some pottery sherds have come out of this particular unit. If you'll notice on this large rock fall, it's sandstone. I'll step over here if I can. We think that this is where they were sharpening stone tools. These are abrasion marks in the rock fall itself, and they're deeply grooved and smooth, so they probably sat on this rock and rubbed their stone tools to sharpen the edges. Down slope, how do you like this? We also tested down here in this area. We had information that this was historically used. There is a fire ring that was probably used in camping in recent times, but this also had a slight midden deposit in this west wall that's very dark also, and we got some historic materials out of the top levels. These units are not completely down yet. We're still getting a few artifacts in the material we're recovering. It rained last night and got wet, so we're having to let the two west winds dry a little bit before we can go any further. This afternoon we plan to open up a couple of units down the talus slope so we can explore a little bit. They're laid out and have not been started yet, but we hope to explore what was tossed over the side or the front of the shelter. So maybe we can gain some information from the deposits there and try to figure out what people were, the inhabitants were tossing away or weren't able to utilize. Seems that this area probably was a nice place to at least live temporarily. They had a water source with the spring right over there, and the drip line, as you can see, because it recently rained, did afford quite an area to be safe from the weather and elements.
We're plotting in a lot of the exact locations for the wood and whatnot that has survived in here. Did you tell them all about the muck?
Is the flag the original point of the netting stone, or is it just right where
so we wouldn't step on it?
This shelter we're calling the wet shelter for obvious reasons. It has a bedrock seep spring that's coming out of the center of it, and that has caused some unique conditions, chemical conditions in the soil for preservation, and that is why we're excavating a unit right in the water-saturated soils. And what we've found in there are well-preserved floral plant remains, nut shells, and wood fragments. We've also found animal bone fragments, very well preserved, and stone artifacts as well. So we're continuing down, even though the unit is filling up with water, in hopes that we might find some more perishable kinds of artifacts that otherwise would not be preserved. But because these soils have water running through them constantly, that's a really good preservative. The other extreme condition that exists in these bluff shelters is dryness, and that also preserves artifacts, things like basketry and fabric and plant remains, animal remains, and we have both of those conditions present in these shelters. We've got some other excavation units over here to my right, and this is where we're teaching people that are new to archaeology how to excavate scientifically and correctly. And we've uncovered some interesting things here already. We've got some of the water-saturated soils at the edges of these two units. In addition, we've got, again, a nice, what we call a midden deposit or trash deposit that has pieces of stone tools and pottery and charcoal from fires and animal bone. And so that will tell us about, help us to date these deposits and what kind of activities were done here. But clearly, we already know that the three shelters along this bluff line probably were occupied year-round. They're south-facing. They're really excellent sheltered spaces to live in. And again, in this shelter, we also have evidence that of more recent use of possibly some kind of an animal pen, and certainly the spring was a good source of water that was used in more recent years. So we can document people living here for probably for several thousand years easily.
Look here, what is this? What is this? Look at this, bones. Bones, isn't it? Aren't those little bones?
Yeah, hold on to articulate it. Yeah, it's a radius and an ulna. They're just sitting there right where they were.
Yes,
right there were
yes,
tossed.
yes.
That's kind of cute.
You want to measure these guys for our
Yeah.
dating to them?
Yeah, we need to map those in, and they'll get their own FSN because they're in there. When they were tossed in there, they still had
Meat on them.
meat on them, tendons and things on them together. Little animal.
Maybe the other part of the turkey we found here?
Yeah.
Okay. This shelter we're calling the open shelter, and of all the sites that we're investigating this year, this one has had the most damage done to it. And if you look over here to my left, there's sort of a pile of dirt there that we're screening through 1/4 inch mesh screen, and that pile actually originally went all the way up to the ceiling of the shelter, and that's back dirt from the illegal digging that was done in the shelter. And you can see actually the screen is standing in the trench that was dug out, and then behind the lady there in the background is another rectangular area that was dug out by vandals. Despite the fact that this illegal digging was done, we were still able to find intact deposits in this shelter, very important ones, possibly as old as 10,000 years old. And that's how we chose these areas that are being excavated now. These are two areas in which we feel that there are intact deposits. And what we've found is that they're stratified deposits, and that means that they're deposits of archaeological remains interspersed with soil that has no artifacts at all, and then there's sort of like a layer cake effect, and that's really important. It helps us to date the site and to understand what's going on here. We're also having some units excavated down below outside the shelter, and this area is called the talus slope, and this is often a very rich area outside of rock shelters where trash is discarded and where special activities are done, like making stone tools or sharpening stone tools. And we have found hundreds and hundreds of stone artifacts in these areas, and we're hoping that we can find clusters of artifacts that might indicate areas where particular activities were done out in this part of the site. And when we began this area last week, we had a group of high school students, gifted and talented students, working in these areas, and they were being instructed in archaeological excavation techniques and learning how to excavate. And we're continuing the excavations in this area because we feel it will be an important one for understanding this shelter. This is the Rockfall shelter, and this is the fourth shelter that we're working in this year. This shelter, although there's very little room, it's filled with roof fall, there still are valuable archaeological deposits here that we've been able to test. And like the other shelters, this shelter has had some illegal digging, and despite that disturbance, we have found significant intact archaeological deposits. And the supervisor at this site is Gary Knutson, and he's the forest archaeologist for the Ozark St. Francis Forest. And I'll let him tell you more specifically about the kinds of excavations being done here and what they found so far.
This site was first recorded in 1986, at the same time the others were, and at the time it was recorded, it had some disturbance from vandalism. In fact, they had excavated into a prehistoric burial and the archaeologists that recorded them found long bones on the surface in the back dirt pile. And so that was one of the reasons we wanted to look at this site, was to determine how much was left intact even though it had been disturbed. We also wanted to see if any of the burial was left and if there in fact were others here. We also wanted to see how deep the deposits were and if the pot hunters had hit the bottom of the cultural deposits. And so we put 2 units in order to look at those deposits that we thought were still intact and undisturbed, and also catch the edge of the pot hunters' pits so we could see if they had indeed disturbed all the way to the bottom. And so far what we've discovered is that they probably had not reached the bottom of the cultural deposits, that there were still archaeological information below those, but they were very close to the bottom. We did find part of the burial still intact, and it was the upper left shoulder area, and the only reason it was still intact was because it was beneath a large piece of roof fall, and they just didn't bother to excavate underneath it. We have found in this shelter evidence of prehistoric occupation from the early archaic all the way up through the late prehistoric, and we found everything in between. This is based on projectile points that we found and also on pieces of prehistoric ceramic that we've found. We are excited about this shelter because it has deposits that are over 1 meter deep. It has some interesting stratigraphy or layering showing up in one of the units, and that should give us some interesting information if we can get enough light to get the profiles done and get the photographs of it taken. We also have put another unit out over on the other side, out in the front of the shelter, in order to see if there were prehistoric activities out there, and also to look at the way that the rock shelter itself was formed. And we're down to about 1/2 meter now there, and we're out of the cultural deposits pretty much, but we're still going to go as deep as we can. We're also getting ready to put another unit out a little further down on the talus slope so that we can test it, and that should give us more information about the way that the rock shelter was formed, and also give us information as to whether this roof fall that we're standing on now post-dates the prehistoric occupation, or if it fell while the Native Americans were occupying the site. One of the sad things about this site is that it was vandalized, and this is a problem all over the forest. We have hundreds of, or even thousands of rock shelters on this forest, and I can count on one hand how many have not been disturbed. It's a local tradition in the area for people to go out and dig in these sites and to collect for their own personal collections, but it's also beyond that in that a lot of these people do it to make money. And it is illegal to do that on federal property. They're protected by the Archaeological Resources Protection Act, and that establishes fines and jail terms if someone is convicted. Both misdemeanor and felony charges can be brought. The problem with pot hunting is that it creates a hole in the archaeological data. Once you dig all of that stuff out, you can't replace it. You can't put it back into the ground the way it was before. And so it's kind of like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle and you're missing several of the pieces. It just doesn't make sense, and it takes everything out of context. Even if the pot hunter comes back later and gives us the artifacts that they took out of the site, we still don't know where in the ground that they came from. And it's the context or the artifact's relationship with everything around them that give them their importance. For example, I can look at an arrowhead and I can, by the shape and the material, probably tell you something about the date that it was made and it was used. But if I excavate it and find it next to a fire pit, for example, I can take that fire pit, I can run a radiocarbon date on it, and I can tell you within 100 to 50 years of when it was used and what it was when it was used and when it was manufactured. I can also then, by looking at other artifacts around it, tell you the use of the tool, whether it was used as a knife, whether it was used as an arrowhead or a dart point, and the kinds of activities that took place around that. This kind of information tells us more about the people, and it's the people that we're interested in as archaeologists and anthropologists. We're not really interested in the artifact itself. We're interested in what the artifact can tell us about people. And so when pot hunters come in, it destroys this scientific information, and we don't have the opportunity to learn more about the people that were here before. And it's really sad when it occurs on public land, such as a national forest or a national park, because that heritage, while it does belong to the Native Americans because of their closer tie, it also belongs to all of the Americans that pay taxes to support the national forest and the park system or whatever federal land you happen to be on. One of the things that the archaeologists really use a lot in testing sites is the stratigraphy, or the layering that occurs in sites. And you can see in this corner that there is layering. There's this dark surface up here, and then there's a white ashy lens in here, and then there's red clay down below. Or it's probably a fire in here, and this is the ash on the top. And then when a later people came in, they lived just right on top of that fireplace. And so we look at that, and that gives us an idea of what happened. And then below that is another dark layer of midden material, and you can see the different layers as you continue on down. And those give us an idea of the different occupations that occur. But when pot hunting happens, as has occurred over here and in this back corner, that layering is destroyed. And so we can't tie any of the artifacts back into those layers, and those artifacts then have lost their context or the relationship of the ground around them and can't tell us as much about the people that occupied this site. This particular rock shelter we were hoping to get perishable materials out of, because rock shelters are protected from the rain for the most part and stay very dry, and they usually have a nitrate in the soil that maintains the dryness. And so things like leather and basketry and grasses are usually preserved in rock shelter sites. I'm a little surprised that we haven't found very much here. The bone preservation has just been excellent. We've gotten all kinds of animal bones, from small rodents such as pack rats all the way up to a complete deer mandible and those kinds of bones. And those things tell us about what the Native Americans ate, their diet, and it also can give us an idea of some of the tools that they used and they made from the bones. A lot of the material that comes out of here will end up being displayed at the museum at Arkansas Tech University, which is a museum that's co-sponsored by the Forest Service and Arkansas Tech and the Arkansas Archaeological Survey. And we're hoping to have some of the material displayed there. And we also are working in partnership with the Newton County Historical Society and hope to have a traveling exhibit of some of the stuff there for them to display here in its home county. One of the other things that we wanted to look at this site was whether there were deposits underneath this big roof fall right here. And so we opened this unit right here in order to kind of dig back underneath and see what it was sitting on, and to help us get an idea of whether the roof fall came down after the prehistoric Indians occupied it, or when they were occupying it, or during a time period in between. And it's created some difficulties because it makes it very dark in here, and normally we have a generator running with lights so that we can see. But it has created problems, and this particular site has been a logistics nightmare in a lot of ways. I'm hoping that the information that we gather from all of these sites can be used by the Forest Service in order to help the public become more aware of what their heritage is, and also to make them more aware of the problems that we have protecting their heritage and the problems that we have with their with pot hunting and what it does to their sites. We've had really good local support from Newton County and from the community of Deer, where we're camping in the school, and we've had good support from the Jasper Chamber of Commerce as well. And we're real appreciative of that, and we hope to return some of this to them as much as we can. And it's real important that the public understand this, because the pot hunting is not going to end until the younger generation become aware. And I'm real pleased to see a lot of the local youngsters here learning about archaeology and learning how to do it right and gaining an appreciation for what's going on. That's what the Society Survey is all about, is helping people become aware and learn how to do things and understand their own heritage.
Is this younger student right here, is she doing pretty good?
Yeah, Tracy's done real well. She's, in fact, she got into that pit and she found the burial, and then she wouldn't let anybody else in there. And she has done a really good job of excavating it, and she's done real well.
Tracy, how did you find an interest in archaeology?
Well, I first started liking it when my social studies teacher was talking to us about archaeology, and I thought it was really interesting. So my brother found out about this, and I decided to try it.
Well, great. Are you enjoying it?
Yes, very much.
Great.
One of the logistical problems that we've got now that we've done some excavation are the rocks that I'm standing on right now. They are pieces of roof fall that have come down during the occupation of the shelter, which is obvious because over in this corner we still have cultural deposits that go at least 40 centimeters further down. But how we're going to get them, I don't know, because we tried to break this rock up and it's too thick to break up, and our walls would have collapsed and we'd have lost our profile, so we have to wait and figure out another method to get them out. But it's interesting in that they are here and that the Native Americans were occupying it. Then there was a roof fall, and they came right back in and began to occupy it again. It didn't seem to bother them too much. Hopefully there will be sealed deposits under here that will give us a really good picture into the past, a window, if you will, so that we can look at sealed deposits that don't have any disturbance from the top, and that will give us a much better picture of what's going on. The Society Dig has been a real good partnership between the Arkansas Archaeological Survey, the Arkansas Archaeological Society, and the U.S. Forest Service. One of the things it does for the forest is it gives us a labor force that we wouldn't be able to do in this day and age of low budgets and that kind of thing. So it gives us a number of people and allows us to do projects that otherwise would take us years to do. And the information that we gather out of testing these 4 sites and the historic structure will be used to help the Forest Service manage the other sites in the forest in a much more efficient manner. It will give us an idea of the kinds of things we're likely to expect in other rock shelters and at other historic sites, and it will give us a benchmark to work from when we're trying to decide which sites are significant and need to be saved, and those that aren't significant and are not going to give us any further information. So for us, it's a great management tool and a good opportunity to work with the local communities and the local organizations in the area in a true partnership fashion. It's important that the government agencies such as the Forest Service work with the public in this way in order to help us come to mutual understandings and to accomplish mutual goals and objectives. And for my part, I think it's great. I have a lot of fun working with the society members, and it gives me a chance to get out from behind a desk and actually do what I was trained to do. So for me personally, it's a great experience, and I really enjoy it. Okay.
Thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Oh, well, that's great. I enjoy doing this.
Thank you.
I can be contacted at the Arkansas Archaeological Survey, at the University of Arkansas, Post Office Box 1249, Fayetteville, Arkansas 72702, and the telephone number is area code 501-575-3556. And the survey director is Dr. Thomas Green. The survey is part of the university system and as a state agency, and our mandate is to record and document the archaeological history of the state of Arkansas. We also are an educational institution, and as such, we're in a partnership with the Arkansas Archaeological Society, which is a group of avocational archaeologists from all over the state and all over the country. And the survey works with the society, has for the past 30 years, and of course one of the main activities is this yearly training program that we're at right now and documenting. Some of the other activities that are done throughout the year include an annual meeting that's held each year. And the society members are called upon at various times throughout the year when there is an emergency situation, when a site is threatened by construction or destruction of some nature, and we can call on the society members to help us document these sites, and sometimes on very short notice call them out. And many of the society members are very experienced and are able to come out and help us on a volunteer basis to document these sites. And this is often extremely important because funding is tight. It's difficult to get funding for emergency situations. And in this way, we've been over the years able to record and document a number of threatened archaeological sites. The Society is also working with other state agencies to preserve sites and to improve interpretive displays at museums and to really get the word out about Arkansas's heritage. And I'd really like to stress the richness of the heritage here, and I think this project in the Ozarks demonstrates that although very different from the Delta region of Arkansas with huge mound sites and large village sites, sometimes smaller sites in the Ozarks, the bluff shelters are equally as interesting and equally as important, certainly to us as archaeologists, in trying to understand the prehistory and history of Arkansas. And having an organization like the Society to team up with, and the partnership with the U.S. Forest Service. And I'd like to stress that the Forest Service is making this possible as well with their funding and support. And they also will be supporting the analysis of all the artifacts that we're recovering and all the data that we're collecting. And that this will allow us to do a full analysis and write-up of the work that's been done and interpretations, and get this out to the public in some published form. And we hope to do that within a year of these excavations. And again, that's through the support of the Forest Service that this has been possible. In past years, we have not had the same kind of partnership, and we have not been able to get a lot of those digs written up. So we do appreciate their support very much. Okay.
How does a novice that is very interested join the Arkansas Archaeological Society? And
Right.
also, I noticed you had some fantastic classes
Yes.
back at
yes.
the base camp.
Right.
Do people actually get credits for this, or is it to primarily prepare them to come out on the dig? Could I ask that, please?
Yes, sure. Anyone can join the Society by contacting the address I mentioned earlier at the University of Arkansas, contacting either Hester Davis, who is the state archaeologist, or Russell Scheibel, who is the secretary of the Society. The purpose of the courses, we do have a certification program in the Society in which certain courses have to be taken and certain skills have to be learned, and then certain numbers of hours are required of doing various kinds of tasks, excavation work, laboratory work, and so the purpose of this leads up to a full certification. And there are a number of people that are here at the dig that are members of the certification program, although you don't have to be a member to participate in the dig. And the dig is open to anyone. Students that are under 16 years of age have to be accompanied by a parent or a sponsor. The dig is held every year at this time, and folks that are members of the society receive a monthly or bi-monthly newsletter and with announcements of other activities, and there's also a monograph publication that comes out every year that the society does with reports on excavations and longer articles, more scholarly articles. So.
Well, Kathy, again, I want to say thank you so very much for having us. It was a real privilege and a pleasure.
Thank you for coming.